frustrations I've ever come across, well, there are many. This is just one of them. It's in relation to sovereign citizens. Now, I've put out a number of posts recently about the craziness that exists around these particular people, and I've often wondered, what impact do they have on the system? How do they impact courts? We know how they impact police because we've seen there are many videos out there about them objecting to the fact that they've been picked up for speeding or having their licence checked because they're travellers and they're not responsible to the laws that govern our country. So what does this look like in terms of the courts? Now, there's a really good interview with a magistrate done by the Law Report on the ABC, which discusses all of these things. And some of this is in some of the information I'm about to share with you, because they are a pain in the arse. They create issues that are unnecessary, that are flagrantly dispensing with any concept of legal justification. They are incoherent and they are full of bullshit, actually. So what I wanted to do was to have a closer look at some of this stuff. So there's this article on the ABC, Magistrate witnesses a sharp rise in sovereign citizens case brought before the local courts. And this also is in that interview on the ABC Law Report, which is worth listening to. So it says here in the article, they become an increasing burden on the Australian courts, says New South Wales Magistrate Mark Douglas, also in that interview. A sovereign citizen is someone who wrongly believes that they are not subject to Australian federal, state or local law because they believe the laws are incorrect and therefore invalid. They often question the authority of the government, tax systems and legal system, and they are usually self-represented litigants. Douglas says that 50% of legal complaints in the United States New South Wales Judicial Commission are filed by self-representing people. In the last 6 months, judicial complaints have increased between 20 to 30%, and a lot of those are filed by sovereign citizens contesting legal matters. Now, one of the issues, of course, is during COVID, they decided en masse that they needed to not comply with requirements around legislation in terms of being vaccinated, travelling, being locked down, whatever. So they kicked out fast. That tended to breed more dissatisfaction in the community, I guess. And as a result of that, a greater dissatisfaction with governments and the need to be free from this scourge, which was full of conspiracy theories and everyone knows what else in relation to vaccinations. So they felt their freedom was being taken from them, which is fair enough, because I guess to some extent it was, but they felt that, or believed that they were above the law and that they had their own set of standards that they needed to abide by. And in doing so, they confronted or were confronted by, in many cases, the legal system. So what happens when they are confronted by the legal system? I've often wondered how the system would respond around any of this. So there was this dude. This is one interesting point that I do need to point out. So you pick up a file, and it might be a parking fine, and there might be 300 pages on it in an envelope, and you start to suspect that it's going to be pseudo-legal arguments. And so this is the whole point, is that their arguments aren't founded on anything substantial, that they are just crap. And so how does the court, in turn, deal with all of this crazy behaviour? So there's this bloke called Wayne Kenneth Glue. And, I can assure you that there's not much holding him together. There's not much glue. And he's been incited violence charges dropped against Geraldton sovereign citizen Wayne Kenneth Glue. Now, this is the article so there's a couple of articles on this dude, and I'll just do this one to start with. Prosecutors have dropped their case against the Western Australian sovereign citizen accused of encouraging his social media followers to arrest Premier Mark Gowman. Now, this is one of their sticks. So they're quite keen on saying that, all politicians are wrong. We're going to do a citizen arrest. that they're pedophiles, that they're unjustly elected, and that they are criminals, and a whole host of shit goes on. So some of them, and he's not the only one I've heard do this, but I've seen videos of others where they say they're going to go to get together and they're going to do a citizen arrest of all of these people because they're terrible, terrible people. They're Masons. They run a cabal that is involved in sexual assault and abuse and murder of children and a whole host of bizarre stuff. And so he had one of these claims that he believed that that McGowan needed to be arrested. So earlier this month, the Office of Director of Public Prosecution discontinued the charge. In a statement, the DPP said an assessment of the case found it wasn't in the public interest to proceed with the prosecution because it was probably a bloody waste of money. Police had alleged Mr. Glue posted a series of videos on social media directing people to arrest government ministers and public officials, including Mr. McGowan. And the thing that I think distresses me the most is that people like this have the following in order to gin people up so they will go out and commit violent acts against others because they believe the propaganda that is spread by people like this dude. So just to carry on with this, so more than 80 people donated $4,700 to this man for his campaign. He applied for this matter to be heard before the Australian High Court. Best of luck, buddy, saying it was only lawful court established by the Constitution. Now, there's an explanation I offer in relation to some of this crap later on by Professor Toomey, who's a constitutional lawyer. Worth listening to. There's a fair bit I'm going to say about that because that is worth listening to. And every day of the court, Mr. Glue described himself as a sovereign person, a flesh and blood man. Thank God. And I'm so grateful for the fact that he's identified himself as having flesh and blood. No intelligence and clearly no brain. So whatever the flesh and the blood is, it clearly doesn't circulate to the upper regions of his body because he lacks any sense of civility and sensibility. And raised issues relating to land title fraud, murder, slavery, treason, treachery, and acts of war. So here's a really interesting piece of work. So Justice James Edelman said Mr. Glue's submissions were legal nonsense, crap, disgusting, appalling, not going to have anything to do with it. It's just bullshit. So get out of here. And he said in the end that they were manifestly groundless. During a number of court appearances in Geraldton, Mr. Glue claimed the warrant of his arrest was fraudulent. A group of about 40 of his supporters gathered outside the Geraldton courthouse after his first hearing. Mr. Glue refused to plead to his charges, and a plea of not guilty was entered by the court, with the matter due to be listed for trial before prosecutors dropped the case. And why would you? If you have an idiot coming before the court, spouting a whole lot of shit that has nothing to do with the legal process whatsoever, then why waste your time? And I guess that's the way the prosecutor viewed it. So what happens to these dudes when they don't pay their fines? When they think they live outside of the law? Well, let's wait and see. This is quite interesting because as it turned out, his property has been seized because he refused to pay $300,000 that he owed in rates. This is how these dudes get penalised. A long-running dispute in Western Australia has ended with a sovereign citizen, who's this dude we're talking about, Wayne Kenneth Glue from Geraldton, owed his council $300,000 in rates and legal costs, which he refused to pay because he believed local governments were unconstitutional. Because something doesn't appear in the Constitution, it's not constitutional. Regardless of the fact the Constitution is set up so that parliaments decide what is legal and what isn't legal. They pass laws based on whatever they can in terms of the Constitution, whatever powers they have within the Constitution, and then those laws are what we are supposed to abide by, or the way we conduct our society is going to be based on those laws. He doesn't seem to grasp that for a particular reason. is one of the informed movement of freemen or sovereign citizens or truth tellers, as they call themselves these days, and believes Australian legislative law only applied if he consented to them. City of Greater Geraldton Mayor Shane Van Stein said Mr Glue's actions were an injustice to those doing the right thing by paying their yearly rates. Here's some crazy misconception that the laws do not apply to him, and regretfully, we have been forced to take action to seize his property to cover costs that rightfully belong to the ratepayers of Greater Geraldton. Now, this man was a former police officer, so clearly he must have some degree of intelligence, but clearly he must have lost that over time. It is not the first time he had taken this fight to the Court of Appeal, and he's been identified as a vexatious litigant. And there are quite a few of those around. A lot of them are sovereign citizens who continually go into the court, waste the court's time, as we mentioned in that earlier segment that I did, and their position being described as nonsensical and incoherent. He claimed that the City of Greater Geraldton could not lawfully make constituents pay rates because local governments were not written in the Australian Constitution. So the Australian Constitution, apparently, according to this guy, is a piece of document that just does not change with time. Whatever the founding fathers, whoever they were, saw or wrote for the Constitution, they were able to project their ideas way into the future and know exactly how our country was going to be, hence the reason why we didn't recognise Indigenous people. Crazy. Constitutional law expert Professor Anne Toomey said the Council's actions were legal. The State of West Australia has the power to enact legislation that sets up a system of local government which includes the City of Greater Geraldton and other places. He said that, and this Glue said that he could not seize his land because he claimed it under Magna Carta, which was back in 1066, for Christ's sake. Surely these people should move on from there. They cannot touch it. They fenced it. I threw the gates away. They put concrete blocks there. I threw them away. I blocked it. I own it, and I paid for it, he says, with a great deal of conviction, encased in absolute ignorance. Magna Carta was originally issued by King John of England, 1215, I lie, as a solution to political crisis. Since then, it's been foundation of constitutional and parliamentary government for Britain and Commonwealth countries. Professor Toomey said Magna Carta was an important historic statute, but had little relevance to today's society. You've got to understand that under British law, their constitution is a system of parliamentary sovereignty, and that means Parliament itself can always change its own laws, as I was saying earlier. There's very little left of Magna Carta in the United Kingdom because many laws have overridden and changed it from time to time. The same issue applies here in Australia. Magna Carta became part of Australian law as it received British law, so when they invaded our country, we were fortunate enough to inherit their laws, blah, blah, blah. It would have been a much cut-down version of Magna Carta, only the little dribs and drabs that were left, and even those dribs and drabs, they are not entrenched as part of our law, they are just part of ordinary statute that could be changed by later statute. Right, where's this bit? So-called... so there's another dude who decided that he wanted to separate himself from Australia, so he discovered a micronation because he didn't want to be recognised by the Australian government. And from him, another one, they extracted $3 million because he refused to pay taxes and water rates and a whole host of other stuff. So just on abusing the system, I'll just read this bit out because Toomey does state something here that I think is very important. Professor Toomey said, despite what people believed, the law would prevail. If you notice, and I think this is a great point, all of these people who object to paying taxes or rates and everything else say that the laws are invalid. The curious thing is I have never heard any single one of them ever complain that the law is invalid if it gives them unemployment benefits or it gives them any advantage. Nor do you ever see them refuse to use a hospital or a school or a road because it has been paid for by other people under invalid taxes and rates. People, I should write this out and put it up on my wall. People tend to just want to take the benefits and not want to pay or contribute. And to me, that says it all. Where people get these ideas from, I do not know, except people are making money from it. This is what blows me away. I mean, he got $4,700 from this fund that he raised, so he clearly made some money, but he did lose $300,000 in the process. But then there are organisations around who propagate this crap, who sell pieces of information. I don't know whether they sell the Magna Carta, but they certainly have all this sense of authority and power over the things that they say, which have no standing whatsoever before a court. So I think that the best way we can combat these people is to reveal them for who they are. You know, and it's sad because my guess is that they're not bad people. I would suggest that they're misguided and they're some kind of psychotic, I reckon. I've identified that before. I think some of their behaviour is extremely psychotic and they probably need some help. They probably need some good counselling. So what do you think? Let me know. You can always contact me on this email address. And if you'd like, and I would like you to, could you also subscribe to my channel? Let me know what you think. Put some comments below. I'd love to hear from you. So take care. Look after yourselves, everybody. And more importantly, be safe.